Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting today is taking place on the traditional territories of the Hupetchisut First Nation and the Taschat First Nation. And I acknowledge that committee members may be joining us from other traditional territories of the Nuu-Chah people, and I'd like to thank and recognize that we are able to share this beautiful and bountiful land together. I'd also like to mention that attendees and delegates, that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube on the regional district website. And I'm going to start with introductions, and I'll start with myself and then go counterclockwise around the board table, and then we'll go online and have folks introduce themselves. My name is Bob Beckett. I'm chairing the Regional Transportation meeting, and I am a director on the ACRD representing Bamfield Area A. And to my right.
Hi, I'm John McNabb. I'm a appointed delegate from Port Alberni, and I'm nobody past that.
Thank you, John.
Cindy Solda, City Council.
Ken McRae, Alberni Clayoquot Regional District. Anna Lice, Port Authority.
Mike Sparrow, representing Cherry Creek and the ACRD.
Jim McDonald, I'm Director of Infrastructure Services for the City of Port Alberni.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mike Erg, I'm the Special Projects Director with the Regional District.
Good afternoon, I'm Daniel Sayan, the CAO for the ACRD.
Thank you, and starting with Marcy, please.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm zooming into you today from the lands of the Ucluelet. I am the coordinator for the Alberni Clayoquot Health Network.
Thank you, Marcy. Graydon.
Hi, Graydon Clark, Tofino Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, and Kristen.
I'm in here. Hi, Kristen Kerdonahue, Administrative Assistant for the ACRD.
Thank you, and Lavanna.
Good afternoon, Lavanna Mastrangelo, representing Ucluelet First Nation. Thank you.
Thank you, and Colin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Colin Cosman. I'm Manager of Community Relations from Mosaic.
Thank you, Colin. And I don't see anyone else on the screen unless I've missed someone. No, looks like we've covered everyone, so that's great. I'd like to go to item number 2, which is approval of the agenda. And if I could have someone move that motion. So moved by Ken, seconded by John. Any comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Motion passed. Item number 3, declarations. Anyone have any declarations they wish to declare? Hearing and seeing none. We will move on to item 4. There are no presentations. Item number 5, there's no delegations. Item number 6 is adoption of the minutes. And if I could have someone move that motion. Arnie, thank you. And seconded by Cindy. Comments, questions? Seeing, hearing none, all in favor? Motion approved. Thank you very much. Item number 7, public input period. Are there any, well, we have no one in the audience and no one online. So we can skip number 7. Item number 8, correspondence for information. We have nothing in front of us. Item number 10, request for decisions. So now we're getting into the meat and potatoes, and I'm going to turn it over to Mike Erg, I believe, who's done a ton of work for us since our last meeting in late 2025. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I will run through and give an overview of the report, and then hopefully there is lots of discussion to go through this. So this report presents the next steps to identify a viable emergency access route for our region. It follows from the board's 2026 direction to prepare a summary review of the emergency route options, share the report across the region, and gather partner feedback. And it was just the beginning of the step, and with the goal towards preparing a coordinated lobbying effort. Today, we're looking for endorsement of routes 1A, 1B, and 4 as emergency access routes to take forward to the region, to community partners for engagement and some discussion around these routes. This is not a decision on selecting a preferred route. This establishes the set of options for the next phase of the consensus building. Highway 4 is the single transportation corridor, as everybody knows, in and out of the ACRD region. The 2023 Cameron Bluffs wildfire demonstrated the region's vulnerability. The result was about $60 million in economic loss and major disruptions to essential services. It's demonstrated the need for a formal emergency route that is readily available, quickly activated, and reliable year-round. So the options, option 1A, and this is all from the report that the Ministry of Transportation presented in the fall. This is the only route that has previously been used as a public emergency detour route in the 2023 wildfire. It carried about 20% of the Highway 4 volume, according to the report from the Ministry of Transportation, and it also has fewer steep sections and lower elevations than the other options, though there are some slope sensitivity areas that require geotechnical review, especially around the Cowichan Lake area. Option 1B is the Port Alberni to Bamfield to Nitnat, and then along the south shore of Cowichan Lake, going through Honeymoon Bay and to Lake Cowichan, and then connecting up to Highway 18. This route includes more gravel. There are steeper grades and variable widths, so not as many. There's more basically single lane areas. It was not used officially during the 2023 detour and has some more complex tenure issues with it. Option 4 is the Horn Lake Road or the Horn Lake Connector area from Port Alberni through to Highway 19. This option connects north to Highway 19. It does have steep grades, narrow widths, and slope instability. Significant reconstruction would be needed. While it is not suitable for public detour, it was used by police, ambulance, and wildfire staff and other essential personnel during the Cameron Bluffs fire. And John McNabb did give me a call on Friday and left a message sort of pointing out that in my report I said it wasn't used at all, and what I should have said, it wasn't used, wasn't available to all of the public, but it was used for specific personnel, and really it was about getting people here timely, but it does require basically a 4x4 to get through, and as well as permission or keys to the gates. So the next steps, it is important to emphasize the need for redundancy in this, all-weather standards, and improve safety and to mitigate the steep grades. We also need to consider equitable access for Bamfield, Anakla, Dididat, and the West Coast communities. Businesses and residents had discussed and talked about supply chain vulnerabilities during both of the fires that we had, and the economic losses related to the closures when these access roads are closed. And it is important, again, I just want to reiterate, it was important to note that essential personnel did use the Horn Lake Road, and this needs to be identified as as part of any emergency plan if 1A or 1B was the selected route. I think there still needs to be including some options for key personnel, specifically medical and emergency personnel, having quicker access in and out of the region. If the committee endorses the recommendations, staff would finalize the summary review, make the changes that I just mentioned about the Horn Lake route, and contact community partners and seek a shared letter of support with everybody, having consensus or agreeing on one route to move forward. And then the ACRD would begin preparing, working with a lobbying consultancy to advance this vision. And the purpose of the lobbying consultancy would be to really work through the various the provincial ministries and the provincial staff that would be, key to moving this forward. Just in closing, today is about establishing a clear set of options and entering into a broader regional engagement. And I will highlight the operational. I mentioned that already. And before I get to questions and comments and input, I did want to also note that we had shared a draft letter that we would send out to community partners, and certainly wanted some input from the committee. For those of you online, Kristen is going to just, I think, email that out to everyone so that they have a copy of it as well. So I will stop there and happy to have any input or questions.
Thanks, Mike. And Cindy, before I turn it over to you, do you have any cough drops with you by any chance? Oh, thank you, Christine. So I'll go ahead, Cindy. Thank you.
So thank you for the report. And so A, B, and C, what I'd like to have seen in there was the time from A to go from A to B, like you starting with Port Alberni to get to A. I didn't see that, or did I miss that?
I think with routes 1A and B sort of on either side of Cowichan Lake, it's about about 2.5 hours. So I would, 2.5 to 3 hours. But in the it was identified in the report, and the Ministry of Transportation report also identified that.
Okay, that to me that's really important, and a lot of the community is we need to save time, but it's what it is, right? So okay, I'm good with where. I'll come back.
Thank you. I've got John first, and then I'll come to you, Ken. Thank you.
So one thing that's a great concern to me is that the Horn Lake Connector not disappear into the sand. I think it's really important that we maintain that, at least for the short term, as a disaster response route. I'm not quite sure what the mechanisms and mechanics of doing that are, but there other communities have disaster response routes, and as indicated, that was used for medical staff, for ambulance, for police and fire crews to go back and forth through the Horn Lake Connector. I mean, the long-term picture might allow us to have a consortium of some sort or other that sees that route develop, but in the shorter term, if the active company around it decides that they're going to terminate the use of that particular route, that could be very detrimental to the next emergency that we have in the Alberni Valley. So I'd like to make a motion to that extent after we finish this discussion, so that we can have somebody have a deep dive into that and see exactly what that requires to have that access.
Thanks, John. I'm going to go to Ken and then back to Cindy. Go ahead, Ken.
Just a couple of comments. So I was wondering, the organization that lost the most money was Domtar. They lost a lot of money when they couldn't get their product from Port Alberni to the mainland. I don't know how many millions of dollars, probably 20 or 30 millions of dollars. And, with the only paper mill left really in this province, and they employ 300 people in this community, the average wage is probably $100,000. They put a lot of money into this community. And so I think we should have some input from them also to make sure what's, and we should also have some input from the Colson group of companies who are putting 2 sawmills that are just about ready to run and to do with their product. And also for the organization that's in the old sand property in the pulp mill site who's building houses, because they'll be moving a lot of their product by truck, and it's probably pretty technical stuff. And I think we should be involved with them. Just another comment, and I've mentioned it a couple of times. When they first put the inland highway in, I was involved in politics. I was president of the big unions in Port Alberni, head of the Labor Council. So we were really concerned where the cutoff was going to be to Port Alberni. And the MLA showed me where the cutoff was, and it was going into Horn Lake and into Lost Lake and through that way. I think we should make sure that we get some information in our report, what that original result was when they did the engineering, why they picked that route. And the reason they stopped it because they ran out of money, because they did so much work on the inland highway and they ran out of money. But there was a lot of engineering went in to the route that was supposed to come in to Port Alberni. And I think we should definitely look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we go to Cindy, Ken, with respect to Domtar, when it was the road was closed off, Highway 4 was closed off, did they send any product out of the Yubo-Cowichan route? And I see John must have an answer, so go ahead, John.
Just happens that my stepdaughter is logistics for Domtar. So they tried. And what happened was those trucks are highway trucks, and they had all kinds of issue with suspension and tires and other things like that. So they just stopped and decided that they would try to ship them by barge instead. So.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Mike.
I think just on that topic too, as we're looking at the emergency route, and one of the things we talked about is having something that is suitable for transport trucks, right? So grades play a big part in that, but also the surfacing and having, you know, working with the Ministry of Transportation and the other the Ministry of Forests and the other people sort of involved in the road is how do we get things to that standard, and looking at, you know, with the chip seal on the Bamfield Road, does that address, would that be different for that section, say for the paper mill and the vehicles that they're taking in, and then, you know, how do we get sort of the chip seal or a surface that works for transport trucks over the rest of it, and sort of what's needed, you know, even in an emergency basis, because certainly I think lots of us, or all of us, heard when the road was closed, there were certain companies and transport companies, they just refused to come. And it was some of the larger vehicles and fuel trucks, etc. But it was also some of the couriers and things like that that also just refused to bring their vehicles on there. So how do, you know, addressing that is also, I think, really important. And it's not just a route, but making sure that, you know, all vehicles can get across it, you know, is really important.
So just before I go to Cindy, as a follow-up to that, and you know, perhaps I'm naive, but I'm making the assumption that the alternate route will have to include, you know, and be designed, engineered so that all of those issues will allow, you know, transportation for all commercial and industrial vehicles. Am I wrong? If anyone, you know, Mike, go ahead. I'm going to come back to you, Cindy, but I just want to have this discussion because I've never thought that this was going to be anything but a alternate route that would allow us to continue to function, albeit whatever the time delay of the route that we choose would be, that all transportation would be allowed. So I've got Mike, and then I'm going to go to Zorn, and because yeah, sorry. Then we'll come to Cindy because this is still on topic. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. I believe Colin said last time we asked this question about the logging roads, and they're built to the standard for logging trucks. Used to be off-highway logging trucks, so they're built far and above the highway standards for their vehicles. So as long as they're built to that standard and they're chip sealed, they'll be able to handle a commercial vehicle, no problem. It's just the width of the bridges that are really the concern, because they're single lane bridges because they have radios and they don't pass each other except when they want to. So that's the big concern. But as far as it goes for traffic viability, that's not the problem. the width of the roads and, but they can handle the weight.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so I think this comes to the address of what is achievable, what's doable, because the better the underlying infrastructure, the more achievable we are going to. It's going to be more achievable to reach those kinds of standards where everybody can get access. So the issue with steep grades, I'm not picking a choice right now, but the issue with steep grades, slope stability, water, thanks, by the way, thank you for the report. It was very, very well done. I thought the context was well laid out. So I think this goes back to what's going to be the most achievable route that we can get and upgrade to those standards. And that's going to boil down to cost at the end of the day, right? So which is going to be the one that we can afford. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. Thank you. Cindy, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Sorry, the voice is going different. I agree with you, what's achievable. And with the province cutting back, it'll be interesting. It's provincial funding, I'm assuming, not federal. So, I mean, they're cutting back and they're taking away from us now. But anyways, so I agree with all the speakers. And I just want to say, it's really, if whatever we decide, it's going to be a second access to Port Alberni. This is our alternate route, basically. So this might be also part of the business case. I mean, if we're going to fix the road to where it's going to be drivable for all vehicles, why isn't this not going to be our second access out of the community, as well as this route that we've always been talking about for years and years and years? So we have to keep that in mind. Jordan Sturdy back in the day did the study, and he was part of the government and working on the study, and I was part of that. And the Bamfield was really important to him because of the First Nations and opening up that area economically by having a road going from A to B. That was a big talk at the day. And we all know that the road has been good for Bamfield, although there's been some issues throughout the summer and last year and everything like that. So we have to keep all the, economically, we want it for all, not just for the Alberni Valley, right? So when I say all, that encompasses the regional district outside there. So I think we have to keep that too on track. Yeah, it's going to be what it is going to be, and I know the Horn Lake was really important in discussions, and I've taken all that route and stuff like that in years ago. And that was when the hospital was talked about, the Comox Hospital was going to be built closer to the mountain, and that didn't happen. It's where it is today. So when we talk about the Horn Lake, having that still happen, well, that might be a really good idea to still have that access. And the reason is, what's the closest hospital? So if we have the Bamfield, that particular road, that's how long to a hospital. The Horn Lake is how long to get to Comox Hospital if we needed another hospital. So we, unless we fly people out, which we did. So all those things have to be taken into account, whatever we make that decision. But so, and I know where the public they want in and out, the quickest route, but sometimes that's not achievable. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Over to Mike.
Thank you. Talking about the routes, which one to choose or not choose. The Horn Lake route starts on top of the mountain. So the first problem we have to get to the top of the brake check to start the route. And this last week, so we had snow, we had semis that couldn't make it up the hump. They were stuck on the hump. We had to drive around to get up to the brake check to start this Horn Lake route to get down, which is the steepest route and the highest route. The other part with the Horn Lake route is it goes right past Cherry Creek's water source, which is Lacey Lake on this map. So you're going to go by a community's water source with your highway, and that was one of the problems they had with the other one going up towards Comox Lake, was they said you're going by Comox and Cumberland's water source there, so they didn't want to use that one. So this one's the same thing, albeit at a lot smaller scale. And we have to pick one that is economically viable for the provincial government, not just for us as well, right? Because if we're going to try and get something we can't achieve, they're not going to fund us. And right now they're using the route they have 1A as their backup route, and they used it last summer when they had to. So unfortunately, that seems to be the way to go. Is the one through Horn Lake right now? Unless we bring it right down into Cherry Creek, we will have to still use that half the route going up the hump as the way it is right now. That is going to be a bottleneck too. That's a single source. Where if we go through 1A, 1B from this town, we have two completely different ways of getting out. So they're completely different routes. So if we go to Horn Lake, actually we're handicapping ourselves a bit. Thank you.
Go ahead, Cindy.
Sorry, I forgot one more comment that I meant to make. When you ask, Ken was mentioning, talk to the industry about access in and access out. Well, the light industry had issues too. Full disclosure here that I'm good with the example I'm going to use is Port Boathouse, which happens to be my son-in-law is the general manager there, and they lost thousands of dollars because they had to rent in Parksville a whole facility during that whole closure to have the boats go in because they wouldn't come on the road and stuff like this. And then talking to people down the island, like hardware stores and stuff, how did you do with the closure of Port Alberni? They lost a lot of money too, which is great for Port Alberni because we shopped in town, but still there's other businesses that would not go on that road, which happens to be lighter industries.
Thank you, Cindy, and over to Daniel.
I'm making notes as we go through, and I really appreciate the comments around, what is most achievable and what are those alternatives that we want to make sure we're keeping on the table. I just wanted to circle back and say, like, the resolution that staff put together is put together because we don't want to definitively say this route and not the others, but we wanted to put down what we felt were the three most achievable routes given the history. The Horn Lake Connector has a lot of research and work on it, and Route 1A and B obviously has had a lot of work and research on it. And what we don't know for certain is where the money will come from. We know that the lobbying strategy is going to target the province and it will target the federal government. But as Cindy said, I mean, we know the reality is that, like, money's hard to come by right now. And so what we're hoping is that by keeping options on the table, what we would like to be able to achieve is to say, if any one of these three would happen to move forward and we could get funding, are we comfortable with any one of these three as an alternative route out of the valley and out of the regional district? And if any one of those three are not, we should flag it to say, then these are the two, or is there another three that we'd recommend? But what we want to do is not pigeonhole ourselves, and we want to keep it open so that as we do a lobbying effort, we don't know whether another level of government would be like, well, this route accommodates us. And what we don't want is somebody coming out of the landscape and saying, well, I'm opposed to that route. And so really the point is if these three routes are three routes that we think are palatable and we don't oppose, then we would proceed down the path of having that discussion with the key stakeholders, like you're saying, the Domtars, but also the communities, to make sure that these three routes are the three routes that everyone is comfortable with. And then as we're lobbying, if funding comes in for any one of the three, then we're in a position where we can still be in a unanimous voice and say, yes, we support this, as opposed to, surprise, I'm now opposed. And it's that surprise, I'm now opposed, that we really want to avoid, because that's where governments or funders get cold feet and start backing up. And so I just wanted to circle back to that, because I don't want to stand up trying to say one route over another at a time when I think it's wiser to keep more options on the table. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. And just before I go to John, I agree. As chair, I am task focused. I do want to move forward. I do want to be able to have those conversations with the various stakeholders, that Ken's alluded to and others have talked about, including our Indigenous neighbors. So Thank you for that. But I'm going to turn it over to John. You wanted to say a few things.
Well, I mean, you have to, my little beanie cap on with the propeller on top, being a citizen of Port Alberni. I mean, some route is better than no route. But if we're looking at the best route for the Alberni Valley, then it has to be the Horn Lake route. I mean, it just makes way more sense than anything else. But again, some routes better than none. So logistically speaking, in my mind, because of the Dididat and the issues that are around that, and likely because there's funding sitting there, at least as far as I understand, for road improvement, that's likely what we're going to see. But when we get back to the cost effectiveness of one route to the other, if you're going to bring 124 kilometers up to base highway standard, or you're looking at 34 kilometers that you're trying to put up to base highway standard, I'm not sure what that picture is going to look like. And I guess that's to be determined, but something's better than nothing.
Well, not to put you on the spot, John, but you make a valid point with respect to the distance and the kilometers and representing the valley. Having said that, would you be agreeable to the committee moving forward with identifying, as the motion points out, the 3 potential routes, so that we can start that discussion with the various stakeholders, and recognizing, as you did acknowledge, that at the end of the day, there may be a source, whether it's federal or provincial, that someone is able to tap into that would result in a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. And that's a decision that, we'd have to, circle back on if that was the case. But so sorry about that long, statement, but would you be okay with moving forward with 3 potential routes, and exploring that with our stakeholders?
Well, I think it's what we have to do, because that's the only way that this determination is going to be made, is the cost effectiveness of these routes. And the only way to understand that is to ask that question, okay, what's it going to cost? And, if it turns out the way that I think it might, then I'll be all happy. But, I mean, again, it's a bit above our pay level. So
yeah, going back to what Daniel said, the last thing we want, and that's why it's so important to have this discussion today, because the last thing that we'd want is, to have the discussions with the various stakeholders, do our homework, and let's assume it wasn't the route that was picked. We wouldn't want the board to be split and go off and go, well, I agreed to move it forward, as long as it was the route that I was hoping for at the end of the day.
Well, I don't plan on throwing away my cheerleader shirt for the Horn Lake Trail one anytime soon, but at the end of the day, if we get something that's serviceable, that we can use as a community, that's the objective. And if I get an opportunity to rah for the Horn Lake route, that's likely what you're going to see. But I understand the picture. So
thanks. Just 1 second, Cindy. I just was hoping that perhaps maybe the next meeting you could wear that little beanie with the propeller. And the shirt. I'd like to see that. I'm going to go to Cindy and then I'm going to go to Ken.
So, I mean, I have no problem moving the recommendations that are presented to us. But at the end of the day, I still would like to make sure it's whatever is chosen in the future, that the route is not just going to be a patched route and we're going to go down the road, right? It has to be a road that's going to last. And obviously there'll be repairs, but it has to last. And remember, with snow and everything, like it's still going to be graded and it's still got to have all the usual things that highways have to have. So, but I really caution that we don't get caught up in 1, 2, and 3 type of thing, or 1, 2, and 4, how it's written, because this is what's happened throughout all these years that have passed. These have been presented different scenarios, pretty close to the same thing, and here we are again, still talking about it. So I don't want us to keep beating around the bush like this. Let's get it done, and let's make a decision. Yeah, because this is kind of like recycling.
I know as a relatively new person to this board, it's only my second term, and it's just little old Banfield out there that I represent, but I agree with you. The sooner we can come up with, the 3 routes or a route, the sooner we're going to be able to dig in and do the lobbying that we need to do to find the funds. But I agree with you. This could go on for years and years and years unless we're prepared to, consult, make a recommendation, and move forward.
Follow up. I've been doing this since 2001. So it's been a long time, and this has been recycled. Ken's probably just a little longer than me, but on this, and it's just the same issues. So we should have a time once we make our decision here. Let's get a time on it too, like how we're going to revisit it. I want to be alive for when this route's,
Thanks. We are moving in the right direction. I'm very confident that it's being set up with the help of staff and with Mike's work, and with the dialogue that we're having. So I think we're that close to moving to that next important stage. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Ken.
Just a couple of comments. So for those of us who are in scouts or guides or something, the main thing was to be prepared. That's what this committee is about. We better be prepared, because if we lose the Cameron Lake Highway, that's it for us. We're finished. Before we had an out. We had the railroad line that could have been used for service fairly quickly. We don't have that anymore. We don't have anything anymore. We have to think. We can't blame the pioneers who choose the route to go through Cathedral Grove and around Cameron Lake. If they would have known more about it, they wouldn't have chosen that route. They would have chosen another route. But that's what we have to live with. And we better be prepared, because if we have another disaster on that highway, we are finished. It's going to be a big thing. So this committee is a really important committee. We have to have something in place, and we have to get to the government. We don't want to have to go to the government because we've had a disaster. We want to be prepared for that disaster.
Hang on one second, Cindy, because I've got Arn next that I'm going to go to, and then Mike, and then come back to you. And Ken, I can't disagree. The only way we can move it forward is for us to find the wherewithal to make a recommendation that will move it forward. So, Ken, if I get you to turn your mic off for me, please, and go ahead, Arn.
Yeah, so in my world, this is classic cost benefit analysis, right? What are we getting out of it? How do we present the case? What's the utility? Who's being served? How resilient is this in terms of, thank you for that climate change piece you put it in. I think it is what the future is going. So what's going to be the thing that we can sell the best that serves our purposes to the highest degree. And I think that's where where we need to get to now is how are we going to sell this thing? You know, how are we going to construct the narratives that need to be, that politicians, some of you are politicians in here, are going to go, okay, we can buy that. So I think that's where we're at.
Thank you. Sorry, before I went to Mike, I was just hesitating because I was listening to that, and you know what is the business case? And I can't help but think it's going to come down to who's providing the money is what the business case is. I'm sorry to say it in that fashion, but no. I'll go to Mike and then I'll go to John and then we'll go to Cindy for the motion.
Thank you. So with it's been over the years, how long it's been going on, with trying to get secondary route. I think the Director Boyko said one time, it's been 100 years of people talking about emergency route out of the valley, and they've yet failed to actually come up with one. So it's probably been a few lifetimes. And I think the idea behind this committee is we're at a point now where we should be able to designate a route, a primary route, maybe a secondary route. We should be able to do that, because if we can't, we'll be like every other committee before us that's gone nowhere and done nothing. So I think it's about time we settled down and said, this is what we're going to do, and actually push it forward, because if we start picking 3 or 4 routes, we've done nothing in this whole committee besides have a nice report from Modi. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. John.
Been talking about this longer than Cindy because I was on the Regional District Board and City Council in 1996. So I would move that the Transportation Advisory Committee recommend to the ACRD Board of Directors that routes 1A, 1B, and in big letters 4 identified in the July 2025 Ministry Transportation and Transit report, Highway 4 emergency detour route options be endorsed as the ACRD's primary emergency access routes for discussion with community partners.
And seconded by Cindy. And go ahead, Cindy.
So a good business case is that we haven't had so many emergencies where our highway has been cut off for us as we have in the last, 5 years, let's say. We've never been shut down like this. I don't remember that ever happening like this. So that is a great business case to the minister.
It is, and as Arn pointed out, and Mike, that with the changes to our climate and so on and so forth, that it won't be the last that we're experiencing. Go ahead, John.
So I think that's a really good point of discussion within this is to look at the climate change factor to it, because like Cindy said, I remember when we were talking about this way back in 1996. Can you believe that? I can actually remember that. But the inspector of the day, the city council asked for a report on how many times the highway had been shut down in the past year. His report came back as 3. That certainly is not the case today. So it becomes more imperative, and we need to look at it in that climate change light. The whole discussion with regards to which route needs to have the climate change factor in.
Go ahead, Cindy.
I don't mean to manipulate all the time, but anyways, just to piggyback on what John's saying too, look at our tourists coming through. We're over 1 million tourists, whatever the stats are pushing out 2 million now. So our population growth has changed, and they are expecting, economists are saying, over 1 million people living on the island sooner or later within the next 10 years. So we're going to be really busy in that sense. Our highways are going to be, and they're really worried about where our highways are going to be standing at with the population. And that's at conferences that I've been to that they're talking about it. So thank you.
I don't know that I've missed anyone. I don't see anyone online. If there's nothing further to be said about that motion. All in favor? Opposed? So motion passed. Mike, can we, before we go on, and we're wrapping up, but with by all means, okay, John, and then I'll come back to Mike.
So I would move that, that we recommend to the board of directors that they proceed to identify the Horn Lake corridor as a disaster response route, and designate it with whatever restriction that needs to be done through the province. So that would be my motion, sort of crappy motion, but
Thanks, John. And Cindy, I assume, is seconding that. So, for discussion purposes, it's the optics now that I'm a little bit concerned about. I understand what you're saying, but the optics is, are we looking for two alternate routes at the end of the day?
well, this is route would be used as it was in when we had the Cameron Lake issues. So if we don't do something to solidify that option where it can be used as it was, then there's a possibility that we might lose that ability. And if we lost that ability, it would be a significant issue for any future disaster. And, you know, it may not be used as a primary road, but it needs to be used as a disaster response corridor.
Thanks, John. Can I, I was just about to go to staff to, with respect to your thoughts.
I think with respect to John's motion, maybe it could be worded where it's emergency access with restricted use for key personnel or for emergency personnel. So just identifying that it's different than public access, but if somebody needs to be in the Alberni Valley in 45 minutes and there isn't an option to fly them in the Horn Lake, that route would be available. Similar. So I think we could word it so it's very distinct from public access.
Thanks, Mike. John, you're okay with that?
Yeah. I just want to make sure that down the road, another emergency, we've got that same capability as we do today.
Okay, thank you. And I'll go to Cindy, and then I'm going to ask Christine if she can read that back to us between John and Mike. Take your time, because Cindy will have a few things to say, I'm sure.
No, I won't. The only concern I have about the motion, although I second it, is that 1A, 1B, and 4 was in the previous motion. So I'm just kind of curious to know where you see that. So if the ministry or whoever is going to be looking at this at 1A, 1B, and 4, and then suddenly we have the second one, which is to do with the Horn Lake, and the 4 is with Horn Lake, will it get lost in we want this for emergency, or do we want this to be accessible for future? Just throwing that out there.
Okay, this is what I have here is that the Transportation Advisory Committee recommend to the ACRD Board of Directors to direct ACRD staff to proceed with the necessary steps to identify the Horn Lake corridor as an emergency response route and designate it with the necessary restrictions for access to emergency personnel with the Ministry of Transportation and Transit. We can. Okay.
Go ahead, Daniel.
And I don't think it creates a problem. At the end of the day, I think what we're saying is we need to keep some open options. And I think the key concern is not competing with the investment on a permanent emergency route that could become a highway. That's going to be gradual layers of investment. This is keeping an open channel where, in essence, we're saying, please don't decommission this road, because the reality of emergencies is that just because if we were, let's say hypothetically, if we were going to build a permanent highway, the Cowichan route, well, an emergency is not going to say, oh, okay, no, I'm not going to burn there then. You know, it could be that that route is closed, and it could be that that, like we had with Wesley Ridge, that you have, you know, around Cameron Lake a closure, in which case then having a third access isn't bad news. It only becomes challenging when those roads are decommissioned. And so, because then it's a huge investment and time loss to get it up and running. So I don't think that this unnecessarily competes with the concept.
So one of my main concerns that kind of drove me towards this is the community had a road up to what we call a lookout. Used to be a forestry lookout up near the vets going out of town. So that was quite an active community corridor to go up to that point where you could have, I mean, people still hike up there, but because of things that happened in the forest, people going in, cutting firewood or whatever, they absolutely completely destroyed that road. There's absolutely, I mean, it would cost a ton of money to put it back. And I don't want that happening on this emergency corridor that we found that we used and it was effective.
Thank you. I think for me then, as a ACRD board member, as is, you know, Mike, that the report coming back to the board needs to be very clear about its two distinct matters that we're dealing with. So I'm good with that. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. So the intent of this one for option 4 is to make sure it's going to get decommissioned, but not to pursue it as an emergency route at this time, but rather see what the other ones want to do. Is that the idea? Getting some head nodding.
I can speak to that. I think we'll present 3 options to the community partners, to the First Nations in the area, the municipalities. We'll reach out to industry with the 3 routes that were identified in the original report. But on top of that, I think it's important what John is saying is that that Horn Lake connector, or that Horn Lake road, the existing one, remains designated an emergency route with restricted access for when we need it. So whether it's fires, whether it's, you know, a slide closes the road, it's a foggy day, you can't get a helicopter in, we need to get emergency medical staff into the hospital here, that route's you know, available to us still. So we don't want to lose that. But we're also looking for a public, you know, sort of a permanent emergency route that is open to everyone in the public, that meets all of the standards that are laid out in the report, and that is one of those 3, and we want input on that from the larger community, our partners as well. Does that make sense?
Ken, and then Mike.
So just a comment. So, you know, being the chairman of the Link route for 10 years, me and Jack Peak from Lake Cowichan, we looked at lots of different options. One of the last things we were looking at was the Horn Lake route. And I think you better think about this, because the last people we talked to were the First Nations in Qualicum. And someone says they're pretty hard to deal with. And so since my wife was First Nations, she knew some of the people. So she came with us and we had a meeting with them. And they were not very supportive of putting a route anywhere near where their reserve lands were. So I think we have to take that in consideration. We better have a chat with them. Don't forget about them.
Valid point, and that is, again, it's one of those things that has to be factored in when we get behind lobbying for a specific route, everything has to align. And we'd be naive if we think we could push an agenda that would ultimately fail because of politics. Go ahead, Arn.
Yeah, so I think it's important that we don't just all we're really asking for on the Horn Lake is status quo, that we maintain the status quo and keep the lines of communication open. I think that's all we're saying. I think it's critically important that this not be a distraction from our main job of getting an emergency. And so that has to preempt this secondary option.
Thank you for that. Mike, Ken, can you turn off your mic for me, please? Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. So what are the next steps after I do this motion? Are you going to reach out to all the community leaders and the business leaders and come back with a final report on what they think is the best route, or and by when?
That's exactly what I was turning to Mike to after, and we still have to go back and vote on John's motion. I'm thinking that we should wait until John comes back. So. Oh, okay. Okay. So no, this was more getting back to what Mike was just asking, and my thoughts, like where do we go next? And I'd rather wait till John comes back. So I'm gonna promote the donuts again. Take a minute to go grab a donut or freshen up your coffee if you don't mind. And for those that are online, thank you for your patience. And Lavanna, I forgot to mention you as a member of our esteemed board here as well, making the decisions when Mike's report comes back to the board. My apologies for not mentioning you as a colleague as well. So we'll just take a moment while everybody's grabbing a coffee and a donut, and John should be back shortly. So what I'd like to do before we go to Mike, let's just vote on the motion of John McNabb, which was seconded by Cindy. All in favor? And that motion passes. Thank you. So now, John, what we've asked Mike to talk about is, based on the two motions that we've just passed, what are the next steps from Mike's perspective?
So we will take this to the board, and then take the letter that is on the table for everybody is a draft of the letter that we would send out to all the community partners. So that is local governments, First Nations, chambers of commerce, port authority, industry, etc. that we've talked about. Ask how they would like to be engaged, what information that they like. We will attach the report so they can see the background and things like that. Identify the routes that we've talked about today, and get their feedback. The goal, or our hope, is that we have a consensus, that people say, okay, that they could agree on sort of a route and a strategy, and then engage a lobbying consultancy to help us navigate the provincial components. Director Solda, you had asked about a timeline. So on page 5 of the report, there was the appendices that we'd had before, kind of lays out, broadly the timeline sort of between now and July, building consensus with the community, and then lobbying through the summer as well, and getting that. And it's going to be key to get the feedback from the provincial staff, from the forest companies like Mosaic and the tenure holders on the TFL portions of the road. Ministry of Forests, I'm sure, will have some input and say on what happens as well. And I think one of the other things I'd wanted to mention, we talked about this emergency access road, it needs to be ready to go, right? Like emergencies happen, by definition, they're emergencies, they happen now. So, it can't be, 2 weeks to get the road up to grade. We need to have a route, we need to have agreement that this is the route, but then it needs to have a plan, and this is really going to be the provincial and federal, supports to make sure that road is going to work for everything we need. We can't have, and really, when we look at what happened in 2023, it was 20% of the traffic, which is great that 20% got through, but 80% wasn't coming through. And that was, that had a huge impact on our region and our communities. And that's part of the business case. And I think we've had, since 2023, we've had that lingering effect on our area in various ways, because I certainly hear from people, and it's one of those things that's really hard to quantify in numbers directly, but we need to build some of that case on what is holding people back. Now, when we saw the fire again this last summer, that just held people back. They canceled trips. Things happened even though the road was still open. So having two routes, people know, outside people and the community having confidence that if something happens in one route, they can get out another way is big to moving forward for our community. So that's part of it as well. So I added a bit more than just the timeline, but I wanted to touch on those things as well.
Thank you. The one thing that I was going to ask, John, you had alluded to the fact that perhaps we should have costing on all three routes, what the cost would be to bring it up to the standard in which I think we've all nodded our heads and agreed it needs to be brought up to a standard that will allow all traffic. That's not something that we have at this point in time, is it, Mike?
No.
And so go ahead, Daniel.
I'll also add to that. I think this is why having three options on the table for as long as possible is so important. Is that doing the detailed research on the costs will come at a high cost, and so if we were to secure any funding, let's say from provincial government, I think part of that funding would be to do that additional due diligence on costs. If there were two or three options that the province was interested in funding to explore that as part of the feasibility, then we do that. But I think realistically, the province is not going to commit, let's say over 100 million towards any route without some degree of feasibility. And I think there again, us guiding it down to these are the preferred routes as we see them based on your research, Ministry of Transportation research as well, that this is what we have. And then part of the work would have to be feasibility, because if the assumption is you're going to start with a permanent emergency route, and then that core investment is going to be built upon to then have a permanent highway, you have to do that assessment on both phases to get a general ballpark figure of what that investment looks like, because you don't want to undo part one when you get to part two.
Go ahead, Cindy.
I thought, excuse me, I thought the routes, there was a cost estimate on routes before in the past. I can't remember if there was or not, but I thought there was. So I would agree with you. Why would you waste all that extra money to do all those studies? I would love to see that, but I thought we did at one time.
And I think this is where we'll work with the province, because they will have some estimates. We certainly have previous estimates on a Horn Lake connector. There's estimates on the sections of the road that have been updated. Like some of it's putting it together, but it's also, as we've seen at the regional district, the costs keep going up. So if we even an estimate from 2 years ago isn't close to being accurate. So if we're looking at things, from 10 years ago, we don't have to redo the engineering, but the costs are going to be significantly different. So we do need, and we need some expertise to help us put that together if the province isn't going to do it for free.
Go ahead, John.
So one of the things that Highways kind of blurted out when they were talking about this was that they based all of this on the old reports. I'm not sure that's a valid position.
Sorry, the old report being,
Well, for the Horn Lake connector, they used the papers from 10 years ago or so. I'm not sure that that is including the Haggard route, or if it's another route or whatever. But in any case, if they're doing their whole evaluation based on 10-year-old information, I'm not sure that's going to work.
and we can double check that. So we can reach back out to Michael, who's not here today, and just double check what they did reference and what they did do new work on. But I think that just doubles down on my initial point, is that regardless, with that initial commitment to a large investment will be a feasibility, and that work is going to have to be done from scratch. And the work has to be identified from the beginning what the long-term intention is. And I think just learning from the work Kuwait did on the road towards Bamfield, you know, it was a great celebration when the road opened. But then the road builders also were very, very clear to say, please, 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 everyone driving this road, understand that it might feel like you can go fast on this road because it's smooth, but it's built as a road, not a highway. It's built with a maximum speed of 60 kilometers. That was the intention. Now, again, backing that up, right? So I wasn't there as part of the initial discussions for this, but I would have loved to understand the discussions earlier on to say, okay, what does that then mean if we want to build it up to a highway standard? Do we have to change anything on the sub level, or is it just about building up from the base that was done? And I'm not an engineer, so I couldn't answer that. But I would want, for our discussion, I want to make sure that if we're sitting across from a potential funder, that we identify all the steps and the long-term intention to make sure that none of that is misleading.
Bamfielders were doing 100 kilometers an hour on that gravel road without anything on it. So
Leave those Bamfielders alone. So listening to the conversations, Mike, you had mentioned this summer, and I suddenly went, oh my gosh, you know, we could have another situation, you know, in 2 months' time. And so it brings me around to think, what is the message to the public? Because, you know, the public have been hearing, you know, and know of these discussions for 20 some odd years. And we've had a number of emergencies over the last 3 or 4 years. If we have another one come June, you know, I'm putting the political hat on now, not the beanie that John wears. What is our response, and how can we provide the confidence to our communities that we are actually doing the work that we've been tasked to do? That's number one. Number two is between now and whenever we as a board finally make a decision and come up with the lobbying strategy, how can we get, and, you know, I'm just going to throw it out there, how can we get the province to accept additional responsibility for the road that they've used on 2 occasions, most recently, the Bamfield Lake Cowichan Road, and bring that up to a half decent standard, as opposed to the feces hits the fan and we're 2-3 weeks before the road, you know, is half decently being maintained. So I'll let Mike and Daniel weigh in, then I'm going to go to Cindy.
Well, I think part of that sounds political, so the politicians need to talk to the politicians, and we will provide the background. No, and that's a fair point, because I think if there was something happen tomorrow, it'd be that situation, and we do, you know, we will be sharing this information and touching base with the province. We have a staff have been meeting with EMCR about sort of the post recovery on the Bamfield Road, and I've been involved somewhat, and bringing that up with the people there that are involved, and so I would say the staff at EMCR are much more aware than they were before these emergencies have happened, and they're certainly aware of those concerns. So we as staff have been sharing those concerns. It's not to say that things wouldn't roll out the way you had said if a disaster happened next week, but I think we still need to, and Karen Freedy from our office is working on that, making sure that we still need to be prepared, and we still need to work with the province and the other partners involved in the road if it's road closure issues, that we have access. I think it wouldn't be to necessarily the standard we want it to be when we're done with this work, but it's part of those steps. Is what and we just have to manage with what if something happens, we have to manage with what's available at the time and moving forward with it. But we are sharing, and I would hope that the various parties that need to be involved in say an emergency route are more aware, and things could happen quicker than they would in the past. I think that's the best answer for right now, and just keeping everybody aware and keeping this on the front burner is really, really important.
Yeah, keeping it on the front burner, I'm just wondering, whether it's city communications or regional ACRD communications. I think we should be updating our community through the media a little bit about the work. And, anyway, it's my thoughts. But Cindy, go ahead.
Well, first of all, how do we let the public know something's happening? We sign a contract with the province and it's happening. That's how we know, and they'll believe us. Second is regarding the roads and stuff like that, the ministry has to realize, what did it cost them financially, to have the fires and fighting the fires, and by the end of the day of everything, or not just it's all the fires. So the closures cost them millions, I'm sure. And just having the firefighters come and take off from another fire, that's not just affected our community, affected another community where those firefighters were not fighting, right? Because there's fires all over the province. And then we look at not just the province side, but the communities, all the people that were involved, the economic costs, for everyone. So there's a lot of dollars here, opposed to getting a proper road and everything like that. So sometimes I look at things like that. If I'm going to buy something, is it cheaper for me to buy it now and keep putting payments on it? So if you have the money. And then the other one is right now there's been a lot of closures on Highway 4 just to maintain the road, right? For some reason, I've never seen so many closures in just to maintain it. So there's costs there. So it's all about the dollars. So what in the end game, if we get another proper route, it'll be a lot cheaper and it will pay for itself in the long run. So I think that has to be looked at. So I just thought I'd put that in.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
I would just say I think some of the messaging needs to be. Highway 4 is one. It's like we live on Vancouver Island and we have some really busy highways, and we're all travel to the Lower Mainland. We have some busy highways. Highway 4 is one of the busiest highways in BC. Like there's an incredible amount of traffic. There's the traffic matches Highway 19 between Qualicum and Courtney. It's equal to the traffic on the old highway and the new highway combined. Like that's the level of traffic that is coming through. Have not seen the stats. It's not publicly available. I need to work with the Ministry of Transportation to find out the stats sort of post-fire, what the changes are, with the impacts sort of since 2023. And the other thing is I am not aware of another community in BC this size that only has one road. So there are communities, and the Ministry of Transportation has told us and told me specifically, that there's, but they still, they're still Pemberton and around, right? It's a long, long ways. So there isn't big communities with one road in, like we have here with this volume of traffic, right? So that I think that becomes part of the case and the business case for it, and that we need to be relaying that message as well, as because we get a lot of, well, why would it happen? Why should it happen? So I think those are important things.
Thanks, Mike. I just want to make sure, Lavanna, Marcy, Colin, Graydon, if you have anything at all, please, just raise your hand. I'm trying to watch carefully. So if there's anything at all, please let us know. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Arnie.
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but as we proceed on this, I'm just thinking of the federal component, the federal funding component. That's kind of been the work I've done the last half century, so I'm kind of familiar with it. I do think there's an opportunity there, certainly from the port's perspective. There's a lot of things that we'd love to do at the port. Ken can back me up on that. But there's also national parks. There's a federal component to this that's sizable. And I think it's worth developing a good strategy on that in terms of which ministries to approach, and whether you want to get a working group going on this at the ministerial level. That's usually at the lowest level. And so to explore the federal component, because there could be some money there, particularly in this modern context of nation building.
Thanks, Art. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to move on because we have passed that John's motion. Christine, yes, we have. Let me get back to my agenda. 11, we have no report. Other business, any late business at all, Christine? Nothing. Any comments from the public under question period number 13? No. If that's the case and there's nothing else, Mike, did you? No. Motion to adjourn by John, seconded by Ken. All in favor? Thank you. And to everyone online, thank you very much for your time today and great discussion as far as I'm concerned. And let's keep our feet to the fire. Mike, I'm looking at you. You're the main guy to move this forward. So thank you very much, Jim. Nice to see you at the table, sir, and everyone else. Go ahead, John. Great. Good night, everybody. And for those traveling